history of how we got to this point. So in 2002, a bond was passed of $385 million. 2 years ago, we had a report that we had approximately $70 million left of that $385 million. And we had choices of how to spend the remaining bond monies. So what we did is decided to expand high schools and add a new elementary school. So we expanded Garland High School, about 46,000 square feet, added classrooms, science labs, expanded the cafeteria. We expanded Saxe High School, about 48,000 square feet, classrooms, science labs, cafeteria. We expanded North Garland High School, classrooms, science labs, cafeteria, and added a health sciences wing that's been very, very well received. That added about 82,000 square feet to North Garland. At South Garland High School, we brought programs from Lakeview Centennial High School, the nationally recognized welding and auto body programs were transferred. We added a computer-based program for automotive repair. We expanded cosmetology, and we added health sciences to South Garland, just under 40,000 square feet there. We also demolished the existing Doherty Elementary, put in a double-decker building. We went from 400 to 800 kids, and that was about 100,000 square feet of addition. So altogether, about $50 million was spent and 310,000 square feet of additions to the district. Just last night, we spent what's probably the last few dollars remaining, which is the demolition and replacement of the press box at HBJ Stadium. Now, if you've ever been to the press box, you know it meets no ADA requirements. So the time was right to replace that. Additionally, what we've done at the press box at Williams is host, just very successfully, the city councils of Garland, Saxe, and Rowlett. We also host our sponsors such as Baylor and Garland Power and Light. With the new press box at HBJ, we hope to add things like the Chambers of Commerce of the three cities, potentially other groups such as PTAs. Again, giving back to the community. So where do we stand in terms of tax rates? We have the second lowest tax rate in the Metroplex. The only one below us is Highland Park. Our tax rate right now stands at 1.2533, and again, it's the second lowest of any school district in Dallas County and all surrounding counties. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Morrison, and you have cards on your table. If you have any questions, we have a procedure. He'll explain the procedure. We want to hear your questions, and let me just recognize Dr. Castaneda, who's just shown up right now.
Good evening. Oh, hello. That works. I'm going to move down here, and I'm going to move around a little bit. I'm going to check out the cameraman's flexibility here, back and forth. But what we're going to do is, as I go through this, you may have questions. And the best way when the question comes into your mind is just to jot it down. When I get done, when I'm completely done, we'll collect the questions. I will go through and answer all of them. And then if there's anybody that has a question after that, I'll allow you to ask a question. It's not that I don't want to hear you speak. It's just sometimes when you sit there and you have something pop into your head, it's good to write it down right then as we go through the presentation. So just a little background. The district I came from was a fast growth district. And in my 10 years there, we built approximately 25, had somebody count it up for me, 25 different schools or buildings. As superintendent, we passed a bond in that district in 2011, so I'm very familiar with this process. So I hope that I can answer most of your questions that you might have about Garland. An assessment, let's talk about what an assessment is. What the assessment is we hired a firm, Huckabee & Associates, to put a team together, and they basically go into a building and they look at everything. It's a snapshot based on 27 different areas, and we're going to get to those 27 areas in just a second. It's very comprehensive in nature. We don't leave anything to chance. And it's not just buildings based, it's educationally based. So we don't just look at condition of building, we look at how the building is functioning for what we need instructionally to be taking place in that building. And if there's some deficiencies in that, those are noted in the assessment. Now, to do this, you have to understand the district's vision. And when you think about vision, you look at long-standing traditions that districts have, school choice being one of them in Garland. And so you have to, when you're looking at magnet school programs, school choice, and all of the different components that Garland has, that plays into what an assessment would look like when it comes to the vision, because that's part of the district's vision. Then you develop district standards. Now what that means, when Huckabee and their group came in, they would meet with the fine arts department and say, what are the standards that you need for a band hallway, band room? How big does it need to be to function? When you ask the choir teacher, the librarians, when you start looking at standards, what is the size? Then you take the buildings that we currently have that most are the closest to those, and you kind of use those buildings as your benchmark. And we have several buildings that have those, but as you know, part of Garland is older. Some of our buildings are much older than other areas. And those schools, back when they were built 45, 50 years ago, different standards existed from TEA, building requirements, building codes, classroom sizes, square footage is different. So when you sit there and you say, well, we don't have more than 22 to 1 students in an elementary classroom, which is what Mr. Glick mentioned yesterday in our board meeting, which is true, 22 to 1 at a school that was built 50 years ago is a little more crowded than 22 to 1 of a school that was built 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So you have to weigh all of those things out. Then you assess the current conditions of the buildings, capital planning, how if we go forward with this, how would we do that? A bond, how much would that bond be for? What are the things that you would prioritize on that bond? And then finally, document production, which is the final assessment, and then we start prioritizing. The bond assessment will prioritize things that have to be done within 5 years. If we have a roof top at a building, pick a school, doesn't matter which school, and according to the assessment, it's going to go into basically failure within 3 years. That's something that has to be on the bond. It's non-negotiable. What happens if the roof fails in 3 years? Water's going to leak through and everything inside the building gets ruined, correct? So there's things out there that we have to look for. So to provide a basis for ongoing planning, this is our goal, and to maintain our district facilities. So when we're looking at everything, it's not just about, this isn't about if it's older, it's bad, we want new. It's about how it functions. Things can be remodeled, things can be fixed. They can be. So this isn't about, well, the building's 50 years old, the building needs to be completely torn down and start over. But I will tell you, coming from a district that looked at every one of their buildings, in that district, we had buildings that were 113% of the cost to remodel. Does that make sense? No. If it's going to cost 113% to remodel, you are better off, if you're going to remodel, to tear the building down and put the building right back where it was. Example, this district did this with Doherty. The building was older, it would have cost more to remodel, board made a decision, they tore the building down, they put the kids at a different school in portables for a year and a half or so, and then brought them back to their neighborhood school. So this district has done that, okay? To evaluate and establish a detailed report card based upon the 27 components, and we're just about to get to that, provide necessary data that will support decisions about future additions, renovations, new construction at every building. And then you're looking at educational adequacy and facility integrity. When you're dealing with a community that has 3 cities, let's face it, you get into what? Some people say, well, they got this because they are this school, correct? They got that because they're from that city. The assessment takes all of that out. It looks at the conditions of the buildings. It does not matter whether it's in Saxe, Rowlett, or Garland. It looks at conditions of buildings and what the needs are. When completed, the district will have a detailed look at each facility, identify the needs with established cost. There will be a cost to this. let's look at the 27. I won't go through every one of these, but there's some of these I want to highlight. You need to look at number 2, building codes. It's changed over the last 50 years. And when you start to remodel, you're going to have to do some additions. One of those would be, if you're looking at number 21, fire sprinklers. You get into a major remodel, they're going to now require us to put fire sprinklers in when we don't have fire sprinklers in all of our schools. Newer schools we do, older schools we do not. That is also a safety issue when you have children in schools and there are no fire sprinklers. Now, you have to understand, we're not out of compliance because when the building was built, you didn't need them. But if you go in and you do a massive remodel, then that's something that you have to add. We looked at site playgrounds. We did this is before the assessment came out, is going to come out, and we've looked at some of our current playgrounds. Everybody knows in Texas, how hot does it get in August and September? 100 degrees, right? We, this year, took out some slides that were metal. You know how hot a metal slide gets? And if you're a student that has shorts on that day, it would hurt, right? And so we took those slides out. And so we looked at an assessment of all the playgrounds. It is not up to PTAs or groups to replace playground equipment. When playground equipment is to the point where it's older and it needs to be replaced, to me that's a district responsibility. So the playgrounds get assessed. And then I talked about rooftops. You have to look at your buildings and rooftops. Because if it starts to leak, everything inside the building. If water gets into the walls, what grows when things get wet? And you don't know it? Mold. And you don't want mold in your buildings. So you have to have the integrity of the roofs. Then you look at just some of the other stuff. You look at athletic components, the fine arts components. And a lot of people sit there and say, who gets this? It's either about athletics or it's about fine arts. I can tell you from my perspective, all right? I have 4 children, 3 of them who are currently alive. My son, when he was alive and he was in the fine arts department, he was a snare drum player, all right? Well, when he's sitting there playing the drums, I have a great appreciation for band, right? I was at the football game. I also had a great appreciation for watching the football game. It's okay to like both. And it's okay for us to look at both of those, but we don't need people competing about where the dollars are spent. It's about taking care of all programs. Arts is critical to the success of academics in a district, all right? But we have to look at all of that. Then you look at TDA standards. And if you just look at some of these mechanical systems, electrical systems, plumbing systems, then you get to some of the more things that even in the recent news in the last 2 days, life safety, safety of schools, security of schools. When you walk into approximately 65 of our campuses, we do buzz you in. Okay, so I don't want parents to sit out there and think our schools aren't safe. We do buzz you in to get in once school starts. But by the way the schools were designed 30, 35 years ago, you don't walk into the office, you walk into the school. Well, we buzzed you in, we saw you, you look like you have a reason to be there, all right? We let you into the building, and we are hoping that you go to wherever you're supposed to go. We have to take that out. That's a safety concern. And in the 2 instances that's happened in the last 2 days, the violence at the school was perpetuated by what? The students. There was another one today, in case you haven't been home to follow the news. And the thing is, they would have walked right by a buzz-in system. You see what I mean? So we have to start looking at safety and security. We have to start looking at cameras, not just in the hallways, but in parking lots. In the district where I just came from, when we upgraded the cameras in the parking lot, the best example I can give you is if there was a camera at the Curtis Colwell Center, okay, and somebody sat there at the Hyatt place and pulled up in their car and held up a newspaper, that camera could read the title of that newspaper article. That's how good the cameras are today. Well, we need people to know that when you come into one of our schools, we know that you're there, we have your picture, and we will identify you if you're there to cause problems or cause harm to children. That is our number one priority, safety of kids. So secure entrances is going to be a critical component to any of this talk when we talk about an assessment. And if you have 65 schools, and 65 of them may have to be touched, if this becomes one of the big priorities that comes out from the board says, we want safety as the #1 priority. Multiply 65 times how much do you think it's going to cost to remodel every office in 65 campuses? Just that alone, the cost is elevated way up there. And then you look at security systems where you put the panic buttons, where it automatically locks the doors. If something bad happens, keeps anybody else from coming in, automatically dials 911. There's all sorts of things that you can do. And then, of course, as we all know, education and technology integration in education is critical. So even though our technology department, we have more bandwidth than we've ever had, as far as getting things to and from the schools quicker, everything now, as a lot of you have your iPads and different devices out on the desk, it's about wireless now, correct? So you have to do updates, and the state has changed their funding when it comes to textbooks. Used to, they would not let you use your textbook money for technology. They have changed that last year to allow you to use textbook money for technology, because your textbook companies are getting away from hardback books now, the regular textbooks. They're going to get the electronic textbook, which means within 5 to 10 years, students will not have textbooks anymore. They will have some kind of device they carry. The textbooks will be loaded on the device. Well, you better have an infrastructure in your technology that allows that to take place. It's one thing to say you have 4,000 teachers, and all of a sudden they turn on their device and the system can handle 4,000. Have 58,000 kids turn on that device and see if your system works. Those kinds of assessments have to be made. And you can see the rest of it, but you can see it's pretty comprehensive. And each one of these at every school would have a cost associated with it. We develop renovation costs based on building systems and individual tasks. We compare each facility's size and capacity against our standards. And depending upon where your students go to school, some of our libraries are very small, all right? I mean, really small. Maybe the size of these 5 tables here. In some libraries, different elementary school, 2 miles down, it's 1/4 of this room. So the standards are different. Band hallways are different between high schools. South Garland, North Garland, even though they're an older campus, their band hallways are bigger than Naaman and Lakeview. Okay? So we have to look at all of those things. And then you add up the total renovation cost, you calculate the renovation cost compared to new construction, and you review facilities at the government standard says 50%. Well, 50%, I can tell you right now, we can't use 50% as the standard. That just doesn't, that's way too low. I'm not saying 75 or 80% is the standard, but then what you have to start looking at is how many of our schools with these 27 components are above that 75 to 80% margin. Some of them may be over 100%, some of them may be 90%. Because the one thing that you don't want to necessarily do is remodel a building that long-term, 10 years from now, you're going to have to remodel again. And if you think about some of the things, this isn't like your home. There's nothing wrong with somebody's home if it's 50 years old, if it's been well maintained. But your home has not had 800 middle school kids running through it for the last 50 years. Schools age differently than houses, and it's just not the same. We're going to look at Jackson technology for a little bit. And, some of it, I'm going to point out some of the good stuff, and I'm going to point out some of the stuff that is not necessarily the way we would want it. If you look at that hallway, what do you see? It's nice and clean, isn't it? They do a great job of cleaning the facility. Things look great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that picture, except that's what you see when you walk through the front door after you've been buzzed in. You have now access to every student in that school, unless you go into the office, and we trust you to go into the office. That's what I'm talking about, a secure entrance. So our maintenance department and everybody, they do a great job of keeping it clean, custodians and everything. It looks great. However, safety. So on the surface, looks good. In reality, not really what it needs to be. Now, I realize this guy's taking a picture of the window, so he's like, this is really weird. It's like a ghost thing going on here. But If you look, this is a single pane window, and it's really not about energy efficiency. Obviously, if you have double pane, it's going to be better. That's one thing about energy efficiency. See the caulking at the top? Showing you the caulking at the top because that probably has asbestos in it because it's older. So that means if that window breaks, it might cost $1,000 just to have the window removed because you have to do the asbestos abatement before you can actually replace the pane of window, that one window. So part of the assessment is going to be what would it cost to go in and take out all of the windows at once at that school and replace them all at once. Now you're going to get an energy efficiency out of it if you go to double pane, and your electric costs, your utility costs, all those things will go down. But this isn't really about whether the window looks old or whether it's painted or the caulking is cracked there. This is about asbestos in that sealant because that's what was used 40 years ago. That is just a middle school kid that is anxious to get to the water fountain. That happens. Just showing you part of a closet and you're just looking at repairs and different things. How many of you have cracks in your house because the house starts to settle and the door starts to stick and all those kinds of things? Same thing happens in the schools. Structurally, there's nothing wrong with the school. The school is very safe, but you have to start looking at fixing all the different things just like you do at your own home. I will say the board, for about 2 months ago, voted to spend approximately $8 million to basically come in and fix some of the cosmetic things that are going on in the district, which is really a wonderful thing that the board would do that. Because what they're saying is, we're not waiting for a bond to make sure we're maintaining the things. The bond should be for the big stuff. The maintenance of the stuff we can handle ourselves, fixing cracks like that and those kinds of things. Now, if that happened to be a structural issue, then you may need to put piers in there or something like that to fix the structural issue. But if it's just more cosmetic, that'll be fixed without the bond program. And they're systematically, the maintenance department's going through and looking at every one of our campuses, and there's a long list of things, carpet being replaced, tile being replaced, all those kinds of things, okay? So I don't want you to think that the minor things aren't being taken care of. They are. The bond is really more about the major stuff. This is an interesting photo. Right there, if I have a point, see my red point? That right there is the edge of where the toilet is over here up to your left. You come around, you wash your hands, you can get a drink. Back when this was in code, this is the way that you did it. Now, I will tell you that the maintenance is, by now, it's either going to happen this week or whatever, the water fountain's going to come out. We have other water fountains in the hallway, and we're going to take that out. We don't need an assessment for that to know that you probably should be drinking water inside the bathroom, okay? But just to show you, that's good. Look how old that water fountain is. Actually, I would love to have that at my house, but if it shows up at my house, I bought it at auction. I want you to know. Because I love the retro look. I think it's really cool looking, but probably not the right idea to have in a restroom. And then this is just an example. I didn't want to go through and take aerial photos of everywhere the district has land, but I want to point out a couple things. See where it's the little A right there? You're sitting in this building right here. This here is the Naaman Forest, right next to us football field, Naaman Forest High School. This is the softball field that's right there. This land right here, the district owns, and then this land right here, the district owns. Okay? Those aren't big enough for a school. As far as an elementary school, you could put an elementary school, probably not. Because of the shape of it. But the land there is probably big enough for an elementary school. But what I would tell you on those is I've had the privilege of going to talk to the three cities in their chambers, Chamber of Commerce. And one of the questions I received, maybe a question somebody was going to ask tonight, about a career tech facility in this district, or a natatorium has come up a couple times, a swimming pool for the district to, we have swimming programs, but we don't have our own swimming pool. I'm not saying that the board would determine where those would go, but an example, sites like this could be used, for programs like that. Not to say that they would go there, but that's just an example. When you're looking at a district and you're the superintendent of the board, there's a lot to think about where you would put things like that. So that's it as far as the assessment. So what I'm going to do is, if anybody has any questions, kind of gather them, and bring in, if somebody can help me, kind of some of my staff that's out there and around. I would love to answer any questions, and of course you can always raise your hand and ask questions. Okay? Here, I'll start with this one. And now I'm going to show the fact I'm almost 50. Are you ready? This is on TV. All right. Jennifer asked, current sub policy is that subs are not allowed to touch a computer. I will be happy to answer that, but this is really about building assessment, and I'll talk to you about that, okay? Because I have a great answer because we solved the problem today. Since technology is the future for schools, what thought has been put into classrooms with subs and all in the digital? We'll talk about that, okay? But I will say that we do need to have students have greater access to technology. What that's going to be, I don't really know. And the reason that people say, well, why don't you know? Well, the district's going to start a strategic planning process, which the first meeting will be November the 14th, right here in this room. Probably, I think 7 o'clock. It's 6 to 8, sorry. 6 to 8 o'clock. And then on November the 18th, it will be at Rowlett High School, Lakeview Centennial High School. And then December the 3rd, it will be at Rowlett High School. So we'll have 3 public forums. You're welcome to attend any of those that fit into your schedule. It's on the district website. And a lot of these technology questions about different, what are we going to do in the district when it comes to meeting kids' needs instructionally? What are we going to do with one-on-one computers? Are we ever going to do that? Those kind of decisions are made with a lot of public input and a lot of public buy-in. Board members and superintendents don't just say, well, we just want to all of a sudden let we're going to give every kid an iPad, we're going to give every kid some kind of desktop computer and let them take it home. You need to make sure the parents know exactly what's going on, how that will be used instructionally, and all those kinds of things. That summit is the start of our strategic planning process, and that will enable us to move forward in making those decisions. And it gives the board the feedback that they need from the people that they serve and the people that I serve, which is you. Okay, this is from initials SB. I noticed that your facility assessment components, the list does not include parking lots. Do you have plans to increase parking spaces to get cars in off the street? Well, I can tell you, having done a lot of meetings at the schools, and we do some different things for the schools, that is a definite concern, and it is not on that list, but I will make sure that the group from Huckabee is here taking notes, and that will be something that we make sure. I can tell you there are some schools that we go every once in a while, we do some special things for the teachers, the executive staff, and we park on the street because we're afraid if we don't park on the street, we're taking a teacher's parking place because there's not even parking for the teachers. All right, we have several schools like that. So that's a great question. We'll make sure we look at that. What are the results of this? What are the results of the assessment, and will you share those tonight? Okay, the assessment is still going on. Okay, and in that, what will happen is in December, the assessment will be completed. It will be presented at a board meeting. All right. Once it's presented at the board meeting, it'll be made public. Then there will be another meeting just like this one that we will announce that will go over the assessment in detail, and we will go through it in a couple hours. Are you with me? So we will look at everything that night to let everybody that wants to see exactly what that assessment looks like will come in. I will tell you, the assessment will probably be about 4 binders thick, about that thick each. So we will provide it on the website because that'll be the much easier way for you to look at it. But if somebody needed a copy of it, we would actually we'd tell you to bring us a flash drive, or we'd give you a flash drive of it. It's not something we're going to make copies of because it will be massive. We had one for just Jackson alone, just for one school. It was about that thick, and that's one school. Multiply that by 71 campuses, not counting all of the other district facilities that we include in that assessment. So the answer is, we won't have it tonight. Tonight is more about telling you how the assessment was going, as far as the components that we look at, but the final answer is coming very quickly. All right, this is It looks like it says Nana, but I don't know. No, I'm gonna go with Nana, because okay. Are the assessments complete? Yes, they're complete. They're compiling the results. When will the results be made public? In December. And what are the next steps? The next steps we just covered. And that will be presentation to the board, presentation to this group, because Garland is under the DSEG order, presentation to the multi-ethnic committee. Then we will prioritize the assessment. And what happens is you put the assessment in a priority of things that have to be done within 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years in that priority. Because if the roof is going to go out 10 years from now, that's not priority. That's something that will not be in this bond. But if the rooftop or the air conditioning units, or if you're at a big high school, the chillers are going to go out in the next 3 to 5 years, that needs to be in the assessment. That's a non-negotiable. We have to have that. So in that priority, you prioritize, is school safety your number one concern? Then if that is, your safe school entrances is your priority. What's the cost for 66 schools to have to walk into an office before you have access to the kids? That will be different. Think about Naaman, okay? When you walk into Naaman, you go down a big, long pathway to get to the office, which means if you're at Naaman, you would have to almost build a little makeshift office right off the front door, correct? And then you would go into the main building to the office, or back to where the counselors were, or whatever. So every school is completely different. That's why we will look at all of those. This is from Ricky. How is the growth expected to play into the assessment? Right now, the growth is pretty level, and it doesn't appear that the district is about 200 students below last year's number currently. So it's been plateaued for the last few years, even before I got here. So, but here's what you can do. Let's say you replace a school, and the best example I would give you is Doherty. Doherty had approximately, this is just round numbers, seems like somebody told me they had between 400 and 500 students before Doherty was rebuilt. After it was rebuilt, it has 800 students. Surprisingly, how many people want their child to go to what? A newer school. So if you take a school that the assessment says it's going to cost 110% to replace, and that school has a student population of 400, even 500, it's a healthy sized school. Well, we build them now to hold 800. Well, with school choice, what's going to happen? People are going to choose that school, right? So a lot of times we will be planning for our growth in that if some of these schools have to either be remodeled to make it educationally adequate along the district, and or if that school was to be replaced, you can add students just because the size of the school would change. All right? Is it possible, this is from CC, is it possible that we need more than one bond to get the needed priority work done? Well, yes. The assessment, the last bond was $385 million. Let's just, and I'm just throwing, I don't want to throw out a number because I don't want to tie the board to any particular number. But this assessment will come in somewhere close to $1 billion. There's no way we would go and ask for $1 billion. It just can't. So that's why you prioritize things into 5, 10, and 15 years. Okay? So this assessment, that's basically where, if you're looking for a final number, it's going to be somewhere between 800 million and $1 billion, something like that, or maybe a little more. But we're not here to sit here and tie the board and say this is the thing, because you're talking about tax rates, you're talking about, and some things don't necessarily have to be fixed right away. They can be fixed over time. Okay? This is from Leah. Are you planning on bringing up the question of bonds now, every 5 years? You mentioned priorities. Well, what you have to do is, the state limits you at 50 cents. Right now we're at 25 cents on our bond. So you could, even if the district wanted to, you cannot go above the 50 cent threshold when it comes to bonds. And so just to explain this just real quickly, we have a fund balance right now The fund balance is for your maintenance and operations, what we run our schools. You pay your teacher's salaries, you pay your electric bill, all those kinds of things come out of the M&O. That money can be used if you want to build a building. The problem is the money's gone once and it's not there anymore. But if you pass a bond issue, that money cannot be used to pay teacher salaries, administrator salaries, superintendent salaries, anything like that. So M&O money can build buildings, but building money can't pay for M&O. Does that make sense? So the reason a lot of districts get into the habit of every 5 to 7 years passing a bond is because that's about the time the money cycles out, and then your indebtedness, you've paid off enough that your indebtedness comes down enough so you're not strapping your taxpayers with an excessive amount of money on the tax side. All right, so that's just, 21, thank you. We're 21, I said 25, sorry. We're 21 cents. So that's my finance guy, thank you. All right, so correction, you can edit that out, right? Just joking. All right, so we're 21 cents, we have 29 cents left, okay? And then, this is from Leah again. When will the assessments be completed? It's coming up, December. Stanley. Possible 8th high school was for Rowlett, and the possible stadium. Probably, since I wasn't here, and I've tried to get as much history of this, of the events, everybody remembers, if we all could have forecasted in 2006 that the market was going to crash in 2008, we could have made a lot of money, correct? Well, just as people would say, demographers would say, you need to plan for growth in 2002, because by 2010 or 2012, you're going to need your 8th high school. Well, when the market crashed in 2008, what happened with all student population in the state of Texas and economies? It either went down or it flatlined out. So the board made the decision, instead of building the 8th high school and the new stadium, to take the money that was there, and that's when Mr. Glick talked about the additions to Rowlett High School and different programs. And so the money was spread out between the high schools, just didn't build the 8th high school. The growth projections currently don't show the need for the 8th high school right now. Doesn't mean it won't happen in Garland, but it doesn't. I don't think they would show that it needs within the next 5 years for another high school. As far as the stadium goes, that's more of, it's not necessarily a want. I mean, it's a want, not necessarily a need. And right now, I think the needs are going to outproduce the wants. This is from Leah again. The majority, talking about the killings have occurred at schools committed by students, not parents. So what is being done to protect our students and teachers from students already in the building? Well, I wish I had a great answer for that. I think some of the things that you have to do as parents, and this, I'm going to speak as a parent, I'm also going to speak as just an educator. Parents, I'm on TV here. Your students should be on their cell phones after 10 o'clock at night. They should never be able to clear their history. You ought to be able to read their phone at any time. You ought to have access to every one of their Twitter, Facebook accounts. If you're not, most of these things the kids talk about well before they ever do. If it's kid violence, most of the time kids, after it's over, come back and say, well, so-and-so mentioned, but I just didn't believe they would do it. Well, we have to convince kids, because kids do not like to narc, cattle, whatever, on other kids because they want to get them in trouble. We have to convince them that, it's better just to go say this might happen, and let's talk to that student before maybe they act upon it. And I think that, as a parent though, and I'm not blaming the parents of what took place, I'm just saying it's one of those things we have to sit there and monitor our kids. Nothing good happens after a certain period of time, whatever it is in your home, if you're letting your child on their iPhone late at night. There's not one good thing that they're doing with that iPhone. They should put it up, okay? Now, from an educational standpoint, you're going to see a lot more types of classes. We'll start at the high school next year with teen leadership, and it's a leadership class designed as an elective for all students to have the ability to take. And basically what we're trying to do is convince them to start making good choices in their lives. And those programs, if you want to do a little research on it, Flip-Flipping's group, Capturing Kids' Hearts, the group that we're talking about. Some of the teachers have already been trained, and as they are trained, those classes will open up. We had a speaker convocation this year, Dr. Adolph Brown. He spoke to the teachers. He's coming back to speak to all the high school students this year about their choices that they're making. Not necessarily, part of it might be bullying, part of it might be substance abuse, all those kinds of things that students struggle with over the course of their lives when they have to make those critical decisions. Do I do this or do I not do that? He's coming to all 7 high schools, and he's going to reach out, and then at each high school, it'll be a morning assembly, an afternoon assembly. He will have lunch with the student leadership, but at night, he's actually going to speak to the parents and the kids at night. We feel like we need to reach out to the parents and give the parents support as well. So he's going to be coming, that's going to be in January. Don't hold me to these dates, but it seems like around the 13th, 14th, 15th, and then in February, like 10th, 11th, 12th, or 13th, or something like that. But it's all going to be on the website. If it's not already on there, it'll be on there in the next day or two. And then the following year, we'll be working with him in our middle schools. And I think we just have to convince kids that there's an alternative to violence, period. Okay? And what's currently happening in the state, not our state, but just state of affairs, is really more sad than it is, it's a reflection of just society in general. And I wish I could say it would never happen, but honestly, it's everybody's worst nightmare when you're in education. I'll just be honest with you. This is from Jason. Have you considered the safety of portables or exterior exits of portables in case a person coming onto campus? Yes, that's why I think when it comes to, the teachers in the portables are supposed to be keeping their doors locked. We need to make sure that the intercom system works, the intercom systems work out there. That's one way. And then the other way is we need to make sure that we have enough camera coverage that if somebody is on site, and then if you push the panic button, somebody in the office should be able to look and see who's out by the portal. All those safety cameras and portables and stuff will get addressed in the assessment. This is from SB. You mentioned meeting with the chambers in all 3 cities. How or do you plan to meet with the city officials to find out their concerns? Well, every one of the city officials were invited to this meeting. We continue to reach out to them. I've also had meetings with all of the mayors except for Saxe, and the meeting with the Saxe mayor comes up in about 2 weeks. And what I always tell people, the one thing about being superintendent is very familiar with all the city officials. We are in the same places a lot. They're in the same places with board members, with city councilmen. We communicate with the cities quite a bit. We have a great relationship with our police departments who do the SRO programs in our schools. We do the Crime Stoppers program with the cities. Safety is the primary concern that I have with anything. But more than that, we want to make sure that the cities feel like that we're meeting their needs, from an instructional standpoint, from a safety standpoint, and everything else. So to answer the question, we see them all the time. Every one of them I've given my number to. They can call me at any time. So hopefully they take advantage of that. This is from Jason. Gym teachers and other classes that hold classes outdoors have no way of knowing if the school is on lockdown. So how can, add flashing lights to the exterior building, safety precautions, things like that. That's one of the things that in the assessment that we look at. We look at, remember when I said you push a button and all the doors automatically lock and close, alarms go off to let people know. The problem is when you've had buildings that have been built 35, 40, 50 years ago, those kinds of things don't necessarily exist. It's much easier to upgrade the newer buildings, but it can be upgraded. So safety of the buildings, security of the building, cameras in the buildings. We already have a lot of cameras in our buildings. I don't want you to understand that. But making sure that the resolution is good, making sure that somebody's monitoring that. The people in the office should have access to a screen monitor that if somebody says they saw somebody walk around the side of the building, I'd be able to push a button and see the camera on the side of the building. Okay? Those are the kinds of things, and then when it comes to safety, that this assessment is going to cover. Okay? That's all the questions that everybody's written down. Does anybody have any additional question that you would like to ask? Because I'm going to wrap it up because I know your time's precious. I appreciate you being here. tonight. I don't want to just belabor the point. What I would say is the board members, they raised their hand and stood up. They will be around here for a while. I will be around here for a while. If you are a member of the executive group in GISD, would you please stand up? Executive group people. Here's other people that you can contact. They're around the room. If you see them, those kinds of things, feel free to communicate with us. If you need us to call you back about a question, a lot of times people don't like asking questions in front of groups. I understand that. You can come and ask us the question. We will make sure that we give you the attention that you need. I always tell people one thing. You don't work for me. We work for you. Our job is to serve you. And we don't know how to serve you unless you tell us what your concerns and your needs are. We will celebrate the great things that we're doing, and we will try to correct the things that maybe we need to correct. But in all things, we're going to do what's best for the kids in this district. I can assure you of that. I have 7 board members that are committed to that. I believe that with all my heart. They are very good people, and they are concerned that every time we meet, it's always about instruction and about kids. Okay? I'm going to turn this back over to Mr. Glick because this is a board meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. I would like to recognize Mr. Rick Lambert, who came in the back. And again, thank you for coming out this evening. I think this is the beginning of a project. We didn't really discuss when we think there may be a bond election. We have talked at the board at May or possibly November. I think as we progress, we get the assessment. That'll be on December 17th. We have a special board session. We call it a workshop, and we'll actually be getting that information on December 17th. That will be at our main building. You're certainly welcome to come. That will be an open meeting. You can hear the presentation from Huckabee. We will get all the numbers at that point. Whether we get to 10 figures or not, whether we get into the $1 billion number, that's the question that we've all been talking about. But that's coming. We will announce on the website the future dates that Dr. Morrison talked about. One other thing, last evening was the first televised meeting of the Board of Trustees. So feel free in the future to watch it. It's streamed live. It's on GRS TV. It's on our YouTube channel. And it'll be archived and segmented. So you can watch segments. You don't have to watch the whole meeting if you think you'd like to just watch one item and say, what did they do on that issue? So any other questions for the Board of Trustees? Well, is there a motion to adjourn? We have a motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. We thank you again for coming out this evening.